Hi there, my name is Matt Raleigh, and in this video we're going to be coding a line graph pretty much from scratch in React Native using D3, react-native-svg, and a little bit of Tailwind. So the Tailwind comes from TWRNC, which is just my favorite way to use Tailwind within React Native. And the line graph that we're going to be trying to implement today, we're pretty much going to try to copy this graph right here. So this is from the App Store Connect Analytics. So Apple designed this graph, and I think they did a great job with it. I'm a big fan of the stats sort of floating in the card here. So we're going to see how close we can get to this experience here. Also, download my app Goated if you want to support this channel. I'll be doing a future video on kind of a whole breakdown of that guy. All right, so we're starting from pretty much a blank Expo app. We've got a couple dependencies installed here. D3, React Native, SVG, and TWRNC are the main ones you'll need to follow along. I got a couple extra guys in here just for some bits and bobs, but let's get right into it. So the first thing I like to do when designing a component is to kind of think about what props I'm going to take. And I really like the simplicity of just saying, hey, I only care about one data set, line chart, the data will be the Y, and then it'll just kind of move linearly along the x-axis. So we got that there. We'll take a label and a stat, which are just going to mirror, again, this sort of label and stat that we have here. And then let's take a color, which we're going to make a string. And this is going to be actually a Tailwind color string. And we'll kind of get more into what that means later. All right, so first thing we need to actually do is measure our view here. So on layout, we're going to get an event. And the reason that we're going to do this is because when we actually go to, let's just do width, set width needs to stay 0. We'll say set width, native event, layout width. Here we go. So the reason that we need the width is we sort of need to have an idea of the size of our graph before we actually write the D3 code to calculate the path for the SVG. So we can do that pretty simply with just an onLayout event here, which wherever you throw this div, or it's not div, we're in React Native. Wherever you check this view, it's gonna by default sort of grow to fill the container, unless it's within a flexbox or something, and we'll sort of get that width. So in this case, we'll get pretty much the screen width. I think I'm gonna throw it within a div with some padding here. So let's just go ahead and save that, and then let's actually throw our line graph on here. So we needed data. We'll just kind of put some random stuff here. Yeah, 70, whatever. Okay, that's good. We need a color, and we'll say rows. We'll do a red graph. Do label, we'll call it maybe views, and stat, we'll say like 120K, something like that. Go ahead and close that out. Cool, and now we've got our line graph on the screen. Or not on the screen yet, but at least in our app. All right, so next up, let's start, well, actually we need a height first. So we're gonna infer the height here. So what do I mean by that? Let's define a graph aspect ratio. We'll do 9/16 to start with, kind of widescreen. We'll say our height, so it's our width times the graph aspect ratio. So by doing that, like we said earlier, we're gonna sort of measure this view and infer a height ourselves, so that you give the component the width and it's going to spit out the height. That way you don't have to sort of absolutely specify both dimensions. All right, so we got everything we need kind of set up. Let's dive into the D3 code. So first thing we're going to do, and you'll see why we need this in a second, is figure out the max and min of the data set that was passed into us. So max. And we need that for D3 because one of sort of the core concepts of D3 is, again, it's about mapping data to an SVG. So we're mapping a set of data, which is of this domain, min to max, to our actual screen coordinates, which are going to be of the domain 0 to width and 0 to height. So how we do that is we define scales in D3. So we'll say our Y scale, D3 scale linear, and its domain is going to be from min to max. And the range, or the physical space that we're sort of mapping this data to, is, let's go from the height to 0. Boom. Let's do our X scale now. So this guy, the domain, is actually going to be from 0 to the length of our data, -1. Excuse me, props.data. And the range here is going to be from 0 to width. Go ahead and save that. Oh man, prettier when it does that. It's not a big deal, but it really drives me crazy. Oh, and it's just going to keep doing it. All right, we're going to have to live with it. I like prettier more than I dislike it. All right, so we've got our scales here, and so what can we do with that, right? So the most simple thing is a line, which is, what we're here to build, a line graph. So let's say our line is D3 line. TypeScript sometimes gets mad if you don't tell it a line of what. Okay, so what actually is this line function going to do? It's actually going to return a function when we're done with it, but it actually, D3 kind of follows this, I don't know if you want to call it a builder pattern or method chaining or whatever, but essentially we have to sort of pass a few parameters here. We don't pass them though through like an options function. D3 again likes to use this sort of method chaining-y thing. I don't even know, I guess what you'd call that, but essentially we got to pass a function here. Let's see, what did the doc say? Returns a current x coordinate accessor function. So what does that mean? Let's just show what we're actually going to do here. So we're going to take D, which is a datum. It's our data array at this specific index. And we're going to map it to our x scale function here. So these scale, same thing, right? D3 scale linear, bum, bum, bum. This actually returns a function. So we're going to actually call our x scale function on the index here because we're going to essentially map from the index to the x coordinate, not from the datum to the x coordinate, right? And then for y, we're going to do the opposite here. We're actually going to use the datum here, right? And it's perhaps more appropriate to call this, line function, because that's essentially what it is. All of these are functions, right? And then we can say our, SVG line is line function of our data. Boom. So this is actually returning a string that's going to go in the D attribute of an SVG. So let's go ahead and pull in SVGs from react-native-svg. Let's pass it the width and height that we set up earlier. And let's get a path going here. And again, we'll say D is that SVG line. We're going to give it a stroke of, let's just do black for right now. We'll pass our color in a minute. We'll give it a fill of none, and then let's give it a stroke width of, 4, just to see. Save it, and there we go. Try to register 2 views. Okay, nothing to see here. Sometimes React Native just does React Native things. All right, so we've sort of got the foundation poured here. So if we come back to our sort of example design that we're trying to emulate here, there's a fill under it. So how do we go about achieving that, right? Very much in the same way that we did the line, right? Let's take a look at another one of these D3 functors, what it's called. Let's derive an area function here, or create one. I suppose not derive one. So again, let's say area of number, and we'll say x, again, from D to ix, we want to map across our x scale using the index. And we're going to say y0 is going to be the height. So this is another one of those sort of method chaining parameters we can pass. We're just going to say the y0, always the height. And then the y1 is actually going to take a function and it's going to map our y scale on the data. So to recap, we're passing a function here for x, right? That's going to map the index across our x scale. We're passing a constant value of height for y0, which is basically going to say, hey, the y0 of this area is going to be pinned to the bottom or to the height, right? And the y1 of our area is the y scale, which is going to take the data and map it. It should mirror exactly this line, right? So let's go ahead and actually render that out so we can see it. So we'll do another path here. I need the SVG area. That's going to be area function on our props.data. There we go. SVG area. And we're going to flip this. So we're going to actually say this guy does not have a stroke. We'll give this guy, I don't know, a red fill. And nothing here. Boom, there we go. We've got a fill under it. So we're kind of using D3 to visualize our data in 2 different ways, and we're just kind of stacking them on top of each other. So we've got a line, and then we've got a fill. But this doesn't look very good, right? We want a gradient fill. So how do we go about doing that? React-native-svg very much just mirrors normal SVG for a lot of things. So we can say linear gradient which I want to make sure that didn't do expo linear gradient. Nope, got it from SVG, perfect. We're gonna give this guy an ID gradient. Gonna pass a couple values here, and I'll explain these values in a second, or rather, we can kind of visualize them. But if you've done any, I mean, CSS, HTML, SVG, whatever, this should all look pretty familiar to you. But essentially, we're just saying that, hey, this gradient runs from one corner to the next, or from top to bottom, I mean, because the X values are equivalent. So just straight up and down gradient, and we're gonna add 2 gradient stops. A stop is sort of like saying, hey, at this offset, 0%, the stop color is gonna be, again, we'll just do red here. And another thing we do is stop opacity. We'll say 1. Here we go. And then we'll create another stop here at 100%. And we'll just leave it at red for now, but then do 0, right? And then for our gradient, how do we actually apply that? Well, instead of just passing a color here, just again, like in HTML SVG, we should be able to just do that. Save it, boom, there we go. Now we've got a gradient fill under here from a fully opaque red to a transparent red. So let's actually pass our color through here. So one of the things I really like about Tailwind is just the color library that comes with it. I mean, even if you're not a designer, using the out-of-the-box colors with Tailwind just seem to make a lot of sense, at least to me. So let's go ahead and say our hex color is tw.color of our props color. Now I think if we go here, I just said rose, but let's actually pass a shade. Let's say rose 500. That's sort of the Tailwindy color syntax there. And then we'll go ahead and just drop this hex color in here. And then on our stroke here. Save that. There we go. And now if I jump over to app.tsx, let's just give ourselves a couple of these guys, and we'll say like sky 400, indigo 600. There we go. We've got a couple graphs on here with different colors. We can change up the data a little bit maybe on some of them. Boom. Let's make that guy really spiky. There we go. Perfect. So we're looking good. So one thing that I like to do with pretty much any component that I make is to have an optional style prop here, a view style, and then I like to go through down here and just pass that style in. And that is super convenient, right? Because what I could do here is say, give that guy big margin bottom. And a lot of people, like even component libraries that I'll use, don't do this. And it really, like, even if you're not using Tailwind, right? Even if you're using style sheets or whatever, margin bottom 20, whatever, not having this just, you see so many times people are like, oh, maybe I'll just do like mode, condensed, or full, or margin, or whatever. And then they have some logic down here, but I just think that's stupid. Like, just be declarative, right? JSX, it should just feel like a view, right? I should have a style there. And more to that point, you could even just say, and view props, and spread the whole props on here, right? I don't necessarily want to do that for a line graph, but just in the general sense, write your code like this. It just saves so much time on the UI front, on the styling front. You write a lot more flexible, sort of less specialized components, keeping things simple. Boom. Okay, so we're pretty much done. So we just sort of need to throw in a background and a label here. So let's go and just add a background here. Importantly though, when you do this, make props.style the last thing you pass in your style array. The reason for that is otherwise your styles will override the styles you pass in, which is less flexible, but in some situations, maybe that's what you want when you know that you need some certain properties set, absolute positioning, something to that effect, right? Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this margin on all these guys. I like 4. There we go. We can put a shadow too while we're here, right? What does that look like? Boom, it's in a card. So a little bit of flexibility here as far as like, adding the shadow to this one, but not this one. Now it's up to the caller to sort of decide what those styles look like. So just, an example of the flexibility that sort of style affords to you. All right, so we're almost done here. Let's, okay, so One of the side effects of sort of inferring the height the way we have is we sort of have to hard code or pass a height to our UI view that's going to go right here. And we're actually going to shorten the graph height a little bit. So what I want to do is say we've got a height, and we're actually going to say the graph height is maybe the height times 2/3. And we'll say, yeah, that's perfect actually. We're going to change our mapping down here, or, yep, excuse me, on Y scale, the graph height. There we go. And then for our SVG down here, we're going to change that to graph height. And so we just made them shorter, and now it's kind of cutting off. So not exactly what we want, but it'll all kind of come together here when we do this. So I'm going to say the height of this guy, we'll say height minus graph height. So it sort of takes up the remainder. There we go. So now the graph only comes up to 2/3 of the screen, and we've got 1/3 of blank space to put our labels and our UI and stuff. So let's just go, let's give this guy some padding, put our label in here, and our stat right here. There we go. And let's just mirror the styling that we find here. So it looks like uppercase, maybe a medium weight. I don't know if that's quite black. Looks like they chose a gray shade there. So we'll say, let's go neutral 900. Let's give it small text, uppercase, medium weight. Gotta love Tailwind. So much faster. This guy, let's say 3XL. Let's give it a black. And let's say it's bold. There we go. All right, we're looking pretty good. I think the only thing that I would do from a cleanup perspective is just throw some of these guys on here. I think the stat should adjust down from a UX perspective, but I like ellipses for long labels. Up to you there. I think this guy needs to be a little bit more diminished. Maybe a little bit smaller. So I think the only thing left to do is let's just see if we can get a little bit closer to our mock-up here. Oh, where'd that guy go? Not there. Right there. Okay, so I'm a little big on the stroke, and the fade is a little bit harsh. So let's see what we can do about that. This guy looks a little bit bigger here too, and we can go ahead and maybe see about adding this delta as well. So let's go down stroke width, maybe 2 there. Here we go. You know what might be nice for this color is instead of passing a shade here, and this is one of the really cool things I think about Tailwind, is we just pass a base here, and then we'll say like light hex color. So maybe that plus 600, or excuse me, that would be our dark one. Dark hex color. Whoops. And the light one will be like 400. There we go. What's wrong there? Props.color. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. All right. So now the line we want to be a little bit darker. It looks like it was. So if we jump down here, we'll say dark hex color. And that's like really one of the awesome parts about Tailwind, I think, is, passing a color and sort of just having a full palette to work with. You know what I mean? We're already looking really good. I think we might have gone a little bit not big enough there. And then let's go ahead and add that delta. Let's just throw this guy flex row, items end, throw that here, small, whoops, not for small, 50%, text red 500. Does this guy have a margin bottom? I don't know that I love the center. All right. Might just be something to do with the font and the things that sort of go below the, whatever that line is called, like P's and stuff. Just add a little bit of padding on the bottom here. There we go. Let's give this guy a little gap. All right, let's see how we're doing. I think we're pretty close. Oh, not there. This guy. Okay, so I think the last order of business is our fade looks a little bit harsh. So kind of continuing to pull on that thread of, having a full palette to work with from Tailwind. Let's do like nearly white. I don't know, whatever. So as the numbers go lower on the shade, they get lighter. And let's come down to where we defined our gradient stops, and let's say nearly white hex color. There we go. That's a bit of a softer fade. So Not exactly a match, but I would certainly throw that in an app that I was building. Maybe these corners are a little bit rounded too, but now we're splitting hairs. Rounded SM. There we go. Okay, so that's a line chart from scratch in React Native, React Native SVG, D3, and a little bit of Tailwind for the styling.